The cane came faster than anyone expected. It cut the air with a sharp whistle, aimed squarely at the side of the guard's head. The old man who swung it didn't look like a threat. But now, the entire square had fallen silent. The guard hadn't moved, not yet, and just before impact, something happened that no one could explain. Let's go back just 1 minute earlier. The sun was gentle over Buckingham Palace. Its golden light spilled across the courtyard stones. Tourists chatted quietly, sipping coffee, waiting for the ceremony to begin. Some held cameras, others held hands, and among them shuffled a man who looked like he belonged in a nursing home more than a military square. He wore a brown wool coat, a wool cap pulled low, round spectacles magnified tired eyes. He leaned hard on a polished wooden cane with a limp that looked permanent. A woman nearby gave him space. "Poor thing," she whispered. "He's probably been standing here since dawn." He didn't respond. He just kept walking, slowly, deliberately, toward the guard. No one stopped him. Why would they? The elderly are harmless, a symbol of time, of stories past. But this man wasn't a story. He was a setup. His name wasn't Harold or Arthur. It was Tyler Graves, UFC middleweight champion, 3-time title holder, 16 knockouts, 0 humility. He was wearing prosthetics, a heat-sensitive disguise, and a live-streaming button camera on his chest. His crew stood across the street, dressed as tourists, filming everything. This was no accident. It was an experiment. He called it, "Can Royal Guards React in Time?" The idea: test the limits of British military decorum by disguising himself as an old man and launching a sudden attack on an unsuspecting guard. He told his followers it was harmless. He told himself it was genius, but deep down Tyler was chasing something else. He wanted to prove that these guards, so still, so proper, couldn't handle real combat energy. So when he stepped closer to the man in red, he wasn't just pretending to stumble, he was preparing to strike. Guard Nathan Hale, 34, stood like a statue, not because he was told to, but because he'd trained his body to hold still under sniper fire, under panic, under noise. His mind registered the gait, the timing, the sudden lowering of the cane, and in one brief moment, Nathan moved, or rather, he unleashed. But that's part of what you'll see in the next few seconds. First, you need to understand one thing. Tyler Graves didn't know he had just attacked a man who once survived 6 days in Helmand Province with no backup, no food, and only one clip of ammunition. Tyler brought a cane. Nathan brought silence. And soon, the entire crowd understand what that silence meant. For a moment, the world stood still. The tourists had been smiling, chatting, taking selfies. Now, they froze, some gasped, others instinctively stepped back. A father reached for his daughter's hand. One woman dropped a coffee cup, the splash loud in the silence. Because the cane had moved too fast, too sharp, too deliberate, and this wasn't theater anymore. This was a strike. Tyler's cane, solid ash wood, rose from hip to head height in a blur. The speed didn't match the limp, didn't match the hunched back, didn't match the story he had sold them, but by the time people understood what was happening, he had already committed. And guard Nathan Hale, still motionless, had already calculated 3 outcomes. 1, this was a prank and he would absorb the hit. 2, this was a real threat and he'd respond with controlled force. 3, the strike would miss and the attacker would realize too late that silence doesn't mean unawareness. What happened next wasn't visible to most. It happened too fast, but trained eyes like the off-duty paratrooper watching from near the fountain or the retired policewoman sitting on the bench, they saw it. Nathan moved, exactly once, with the precision of a pressure-triggered mechanism. His right foot shifted, knee bent, shoulders dipped just 2 inches, not much, but just enough. Enough to make the cane miss clean contact by less than half an inch. Enough to twist his center of gravity into perfect alignment for what followed. The counter-strike. It wasn't dramatic, not cinematic. There were no slow-motion flips, no fancy disarms, just one motion, clean, mechanical, terrifyingly calm. Nathan's left hand rose, gripped Tyler's wrist mid-swing and locked it. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Tyler, no longer old, no longer hunched, reacted instinctively. His training kicked in. He twisted, pulled back, dropped his weight. Classic counter to a wrist grab, but Nathan wasn't reacting. He was executing, right elbow in, step forward, shoulder drop, twist, redirect. Tyler's own momentum betrayed him. He landed hard on the stone courtyard. His glasses had flown off. The fake mustache peeled away. And now everyone could see who he truly was. A fighter, exposed, on the ground. Nathan didn't follow through. He didn't strike again. He simply stood back straight, face forward, resuming his position as if nothing had happened. Only now his right hand hovered loosely by his side, not on the rifle, but close, and the entire crowd stood in awe. Because for the first time that morning they realized the truth. The men in red, standing like statues, are not just symbols of tradition. They are trained to end threats before the second breath. And Tyler, still gasping for air on cold stone, had just learned that the hard way. The cane rolled across the courtyard. It hit the edge of a stone and spun once, then stopped. Like it, everything else had stopped too. No one moved, no one spoke. Even the birds overhead seemed to pause their flight. Tyler Graves lay on the ground, his chest rising and falling, fast and uneven. The Rao G I letter 1 EA3 da Roy, CH I letter 1 EBF, C mu PH letter 1 EDBT Troy Lan sang Bern Tri. Val letter 1 EDBP Hoa Trang, da Kong Con Chi G I letter 1 EA5 UD stroke letter 1 B0 letter 1 E3, C Guong M letter 1 EB7 T TH letter 1 EDT. Several tourists lowered their phones, others raised them higher. And through it all, guard Nathan Hale stood completely still. No gloating, no reaction, just silence. But it was no longer the silence of ceremony. It was the silence after a lesson had been taught. Across the crowd, someone began to clap. A single, stunned clap. It stopped as quickly as it began. No one was sure what to do. They had come for a tradition. They had witnessed a message. And at the center of it, two men, one humbled, one unshaken. Tyler slowly pushed himself up on one elbow, his breath still ragged, his pride fractured. He looked at Nathan. There was no hate in his eyes, only shock, and something new, understanding. He had expected a reaction, maybe anger, maybe violence, but this stillness, this return to posture, was worse. It told him, you were never a threat. It told him, you don't even deserve a second move. And it echoed louder than any punch ever thrown in the octagon. A pair of palace security officers broke through the crowd. Their radios crackled, boots crisp against the stones. One knelt beside Tyler. The other approached Nathan, speaking softly into a microphone on his shoulder. Nathan gave no sign of acknowledgement. His eyes remained fixed ahead, his breath calm, his hands precisely positioned, just like they had trained him to be. But under the surface, his blood was warm, not from adrenaline, from control. A teenage boy whispered to his father, "Is he going to be arrested?" The father answered very quietly, "I think he already got what he came for." Tyler looked up. The crowd stared back. He wasn't a villain to them, but he wasn't a hero either. He was something more fragile, a man who thought he understood strength until it stood still in front of him. The security officer offered him a hand. Tyler didn't take it right away. He looked again at the guard, the silent figure who had just dismantled him with a single move. Then he nodded slowly, not to the officer, but to Nathan. It wasn't an apology, not yet. It was respect. Earned, not demanded, and Guard Hale, without ever turning his head, received it in silence. By the time Tyler was helped to his feet, a perimeter had been formed. Palace security, 2 uniformed officers, and a growing circle of wide-eyed tourists who now whispered instead of laughed. Tyler limped slightly. Not from injury, his body had taken worse. But something inside him had been knocked loose, and what it was, he couldn't quite name yet. "Name," one of the officers asked. "Tyler," he muttered, pulling off the remains of his fake mustache. "Tyler Graves." The officer's brow lifted. "The UFC guy." Tyler gave a small shrug. "Was, still am, I guess." From across the courtyard, guard Nathan Hale remained at attention. But now a subtle change had entered his posture. His muscles no longer braced for impact. His awareness had shifted, no longer scanning for threat, but listening to see what would come next. The officer motioned toward him. "You understand you just assaulted an active duty guard on ceremonial post in front of hundreds of witnesses?" Tyler nodded. No excuses, no arrogance. He looked again at Nathan, his voice low. "Who is he?" The officer tilted his head. "You mean the guard?" Tyler didn't blink. "Yeah, he's not just standing there for show." There was silence between them for a beat. Then the officer spoke, his tone more respectful now. "Sergeant Nathan Hale, 14 years in, Special Forces, deployed 6 times, decorated for valor in Syria, one of the best we have." Tyler's jaw tightened. He looked away. Somewhere deep inside, he remembered being 22, raw, hungry, standing in a gym in Arizona, getting kicked to the mat by a man who taught with silence instead of shouting. That lesson had stayed with him. So would this one. On the other side of the courtyard, Nathan remained still. But inside, He was cataloging everything. He'd seen men like Tyler before, in training, on missions, on both sides of the gun, men who mistook motion for power, noise for strength. And yet some of those men had become brothers, because sometimes all it took was a humbling. A light breeze moved across the courtyard. The cane still lay on the stones, forgotten. Its handle pointed toward Nathan, as if offering an apology of its own. Tourists began to move again quietly. Some took slow steps back. Others lingered, not for the spectacle, but for the sense that they had just witnessed something sacred. A ceremony not written in protocol, but in instinct, restraint, and earned authority. The security officer touched his earpiece, then nodded toward Tyler. "They want to question you. You'll be processed, but you won't be cuffed if you walk with us peacefully." Tyler let out a breath. He glanced one last time at the silent figure in red. "I just want a word with him before I go." The officer considered. After his shift, maybe. Tyler nodded. "Fair." And just like that, the square began to settle, but beneath that surface calm lay a deeper ripple. A question. Who trains a man to stay that still under that kind of pressure? And the more important question, what kind of life teaches him to use silence as a shield sharper than any weapon? The guardroom was quiet, not sterile like a hospital, not warm like a living room, just neutral, functional, 2 chairs, a water cooler humming softly, a laminated chart on the wall outlining protocol for civilian escalation. Nathan sat alone. His cap was off, uniform perfect. A faint line of red along his right temple, where the cane had grazed him. He didn't flinch when it hit. He didn't blink, and now he still hadn't. A young military physician entered, a tablet in one hand. "Permission to assess the injury, Sergeant Hale." Nathan nodded once. The doctor dabbed gently at the mark. Surface contact only, minimal bruising, perfect angle shift rolled with it just in time. Nathan said nothing. The physician smiled faintly. "I take it the cane never had a chance." Still nothing. That too, part of training. Meanwhile, across the courtyard, Tyler sat in a waiting room flanked by 2 security staff. His jacket was gone. He looked smaller without it, not physically, but spiritually. He rubbed his wrist, still sore from the lock Nathan had applied with almost surgical precision. He wasn't angry. He was curious. And for the first time in years, he was quiet. One of the officers looked over. "He's not what you expected, is he?" Tyler shook his head slowly. "I fought world champions. They twitch when you fake left. That guy didn't even blink." Back in the guardroom, the physician finished cleaning the cut. "Anything else you need?" Nathan finally spoke, his voice low, measured. "Permission to resume post." The doctor studied his face. "You're sure?" "Yes, sir." "All right, dismissed." Nathan stood, checked his buttons, checked his breathing, checked his balance, not just part of the routine, part of the ritual. Outside, Colonel Barrett approached the scene. A man of 50, sharp eyes under a soft brim hat, bearing the quiet confidence of one who'd commanded under fire. He met the palace security lead with a firm handshake. "Situation?" Barrett asked. "Contained, no serious injury, civilian identified, famous fighter apparently." Barrett nodded. His gaze drifted to Nathan, now reassuming position at his post. Did he respond appropriately? The officer gave a half smile. "By the book, no more, no less." Barrett's eyes lingered a moment longer, then he always does. Inside the holding room, Tyler tapped his fingers once against the chair, then stopped. He wasn't used to waiting, he wasn't used to silence, and he definitely wasn't used to being the one who needed to understand. He leaned forward. "Is he allowed to fight back?" he asked. One of the security officers raised an eyebrow. "Only under very strict conditions." Tyler blinked. He didn't even hesitate. "No," the officer said quietly. "He didn't." Then added, because that wasn't instinct, that was permission. The door opened with a muted click, not dramatic, not theatrical, just precise. Nathan Hale stepped inside, still in uniform, still straight-backed, still wearing the calm that rattled even seasoned fighters. Tyler stood up immediately. It wasn't out of fear, it was instinct. The kind you learn when you realize you're no longer the most dangerous man in the room. The security officer stepped aside. "I'll give you a minute," he said quietly, and closed the door behind them. Silence filled the space. Nathan didn't sit. He didn't speak. Tyler broke the quiet first, his voice lower than usual. No camera, no audience, no angle to play. "I didn't expect you to move that fast," he said. Nathan said nothing. "I mean, I fought guys who made the Olympics. They flinch, they move, you didn't." Still nothing. Tyler exhaled. I thought this was just theater, man, standing still looking mean. I thought. You thought wrong, Nathan interrupted. His voice was steady, flat, without pride, without resentment, just fact. Tyler swallowed. Yeah, I see that now. He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had signed gloves, shaken sponsors, and knocked out world-ranked opponents. They didn't feel like weapons anymore. They felt small. You didn't hesitate, Tyler said again. Nathan's eyes didn't move. There was nothing to hesitate about. But I could have, Tyler started. You didn't, Nathan cut in. And if you had, I still would have moved the same way. Tyler nodded slowly, because that's what they taught you. Nathan's eyes narrowed slightly. No, because that's what I practiced until it became who I am. For a moment, neither spoke. The room held something rare, mutual recognition. Two men who had trained in different ways under different systems for different outcomes, but both understood the weight of a decision made in milliseconds. I used to think strength was about impact, Tyler said, about how hard you hit. He looked up. But you hit with silence, with stillness. Nathan said nothing, but a small shift in his eyes suggested the message had landed. I came here to make a viral video, Tyler added, to test a symbol, to shake something unshakable. He paused, but I didn't just hit a guard. I hit a wall that didn't move because it didn't need to. Nathan stepped forward, not threatening, not looming, just present, and he said with the quiet certainty of a man who had seen war, stillness is earned. Then turned and walked out, leaving Tyler with the sound of his own breath and the weight of a lesson that would never leave him. Tyler didn't move for a while. He stayed standing, hands by his sides, eyes unfocused, mouth slightly open like someone just waking from a long dream, not one filled with horror, but one filled with misunderstanding. He thought he'd come here to test reflexes. Instead, he'd collided headfirst with something he couldn't measure by speed or strength or highlight reels. He hadn't just hit a man. He had struck something older, deeper, and far more disciplined than any opponent he'd ever faced. Outside, the courtyard had settled. The usual rhythm had returned. Tourists taking photos, children pointing, phones up, voices low, but something had shifted. The crowd no longer stared at the guards with casual amusement or shallow curiosity. Now they watched with respect, real respect, the kind earned through silence, not display. Colonel Barrett stood off to the side, watching Nathan from a distance. Another shift, another breath, another second of stillness. He nodded to himself. He whispered. A woman approached the colonel, American accent, late 30s, sharp eyes. "Excuse me," she said. "Can I ask something?" He turned gently. "Of course." "That guard, Hale, is he okay?" Barrett smiled. As okay as ever, his heartbeat probably never changed. The woman hesitated. "Why do they do it?" she asked. "Just stand there, let people yell in their faces, take pictures, poke fun. Why not react sooner?" Barrett looked at her for a moment, then gestured toward the post where Nathan stood again as if nothing had happened. "Because that's not part of the job," he said softly. "It's the job." She frowned slightly. "But isn't it demeaning to stand still and be mocked?" Barrett shook his head. "No, because they know who they are. They don't need to prove it with a look or a word or a threat." He let the silence settle, then added, "You see a uniform. They feel the weight of everyone who wore it before them." Elsewhere, in the security office, Tyler sat down again, this time without resistance. No pacing, no performance. A guard walked in with a clipboard, calm, professional. "You're free to go," he said. "Pending formal review, the palace reserves the right to press charges." Tyler nodded. "I understand." He stood slowly, turned toward the door, then paused. "Can I ask one more question?" The guard tilted his head. "Sure. Do they all train like that?" The guard smiled faintly. "They train for war," he said. "Ceremony is just what the public gets to see." As Tyler stepped outside, the sun hit his face. The same sun he had walked under earlier that morning, but everything had changed. The square, the silence, him. He passed a young boy holding a toy sword. The boy looked up and whispered to his father, "Daddy, can I be like that guard someday?" The father smiled. "You can try, son. But it takes more than standing still. It takes never moving unless it truly matters." The next morning, Buckingham Palace looked the same. Same gray stones, same black railings, same slow waves of tourists drifting in and out like the tide. But something in the air felt different, subtler, more careful, more reverent. People kept their distance from the guards, not because of fear, but because they now understood what stood behind those red coats and silent stares. Guard Nathan Hale took his position once more, back straight, eyes forward, rifle at his side. There was no trace of yesterday's confrontation, no bruises, no headlines on his uniform, only the memory held quietly beneath his breath like a soldier holds prayer in the middle of a storm. He hadn't spoken a word to Tyler since their meeting. He didn't need to. The silence had said everything. Tyler stood behind the crowd now. No cameras, no crew, no disguise. Just a man with hands in his pockets and something in his chest he couldn't quite name. Not shame, not pride, just a new shape to the space inside him where ego used to sit. He watched Nathan for a while. No movement, no reaction. Then as the guards slowly turned during the rotation drill, their eyes met for the briefest moment. No nod, no smile, but something passed between them. Recognition. And perhaps just the faintest spark of mutual respect. Then the formation turned again, and Nathan disappeared into stillness. Later that week, Tyler appeared on a podcast. The host expected the usual bravado, but instead, Tyler said something no one had ever heard from him before. "I got beat by a guy who never threw a punch, and it was the cleanest loss I've ever had." The host laughed nervously. "But you're not talking about a fight, are you?" Tyler shook his head. "No, I'm talking about a man who stood so still it made the whole world realize how little most of us really know about discipline." At the palace, Colonel Barrett watched a new group of guards take position. He didn't say anything, just observed. Then to the young officer beside him, he murmured, "You know what makes these men different?" The officer raised an eyebrow. "The boots, the rifle." Barrett smiled softly. "No, it's the silence, because silence only speaks when it has nothing left to prove." That evening, Nathan returned to the barracks, removed his jacket, cleaned his rifle, hung up his cap. Another day, another post, but something lingered, the echo of a moment where discipline stood taller than force. And somewhere, in a quiet gym in California, Tyler Graves rewound the security footage not to relive his embarrassment, but to study it, frame by frame. The moment's stillness became power. The moment's ceremony became something more. What would you have done in Tyler's place? Would you have seen past the uniform to recognize the soldier beneath? Or would you, like so many, have mistaken silence for weakness? Let us know in the comments below. And if this story made you think twice about the men who stand without flinching, give it a like and subscribe for more stories where symbols come alive. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place, and maybe just a little wiser.